If you're staring at a screen full of specs and wondering whether a $3,000 plus gaming laptop is really worth the gamble, you're not alone. Most of us have been burned by a machine that sounded perfect on paper but turned out to be a noisy, short-lived disappointment. The fear of throwing hard-earned cash at the wrong model is real, especially when you need something that can actually handle the games you love and the side projects you juggle. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's talk about the HP Omen 16 with an RTX 5070 and an AMD Ryzen 9 8940HX. At first glance it screams elite gaming machine, but the real question is whether the hype translates into everyday value for you. I spent the last 2 weeks running this laptop through a mix of demanding titles, a few video editing sessions, and a couple of late-night streaming marathons, so I can break down what you'll actually experience when you flip the power button. First up, performance. The RTX 5070 sits comfortably in the sweet spot between the RTX 4060 Ti and the RTX 6080. In practice that means you can push Cyberpunk 2077, Red Dead Redemption 2, or Baldur's Gate 3 into the high-ultra settings at 144 Hz on the 16-inch WQXGA panel without the frame rate tanking. I was consistently hitting 100,120 frames per second in Cyberpunk with ray tracing turned on, which is impressive for a laptop of this size. The Ryzen 9 8940HX, with its 8 cores and 16 threads, showed its strength when I opened Premiere Pro while the game was still running in the background. Rendering a 4K sequence took just a few minutes less than on my desktop workhorse, and the laptop never hiccuped. What makes those numbers feel solid is the Omen Tempest cooling system. HP has redesigned the vapor chamber and added extra heat pipes, and the result is a laptop that stays surprisingly quiet under load. While I was gaming, the fan spun up to a moderate whine but never crossed into that ear-shattering screech that makes you want to mute the game's soundtrack. Even during a 45-minute streaming session where I was running OBS, Discord, and the game simultaneously, the temperatures hovered in the low 80s Celsius, well within safe limits. That stability matters because many high-end laptops will throttle after 10 minutes, forcing you back to lower settings. Now, the display. A 16-inch WQXGA screen, 25601600, gives you roughly 10% more vertical real estate than a standard 1080p panel, which is a subtle but welcome boost for both gaming and productivity. Colors are vivid, and the 165 Hz refresh rate pairs nicely with the RTX 5070's output. In a fast-paced shooter like Valorant, the combination made tracking enemies feel buttery smooth. For creative work, the higher pixel density means less scaling when you're editing photos or laying out a timeline. The downside? The panel isn't HDR certified, so you won't see the same punchy highlights you'd get on a dedicated HDR laptop. If HDR gaming is a priority, you'll have to compromise. Storage and memory are another practical win. The 1TB PCIe 4.0 SSD loaded Windows in under 10 seconds and gave games near-instant load times. With 64 GB of DDR5 RAM you can have a dozen browser tabs, a full Photoshop file, and a game all running side by side without hitting the swap file. That amount of RAM feels a bit overkill for most gamers, but if you also do 3D rendering or virtual machine work, it future-proofs the machine for years. Connectivity is where the Omen shines for people who need a full desktop replacement setup. For USB ports, one USB-C that supports DisplayPort and power delivery, and 3 USB let you hook up a mouse, external SSD, and a controller simultaneously. HDMI 2.1 gives you the option to push the laptop to a 4K TV at 120 Hz if you ever want a couch gaming experience. I plugged the laptop into a 27-inch 144 Hz monitor and the switch was seamless. The laptop recognized the external display instantly and kept the same frame rate without dropping performance. What about the downsides? Size and weight are the first things you'll notice. At roughly 6 pounds and a chassis that's about an inch thick, the Omen 16 is more of a portable workstation than a truly mobile gaming notebook. Carrying it around campus or on a train is doable, but you'll feel the bulk if you try to sling it into a small backpack. Battery life follows the same pattern. Even with a 99 Wh cell, you're looking at around 3 to 4 hours of gaming on a single charge. That's fine if you plan to stay plugged in, but it's not the pick-you-pan-go solution you'd expect from a laptop. For pure gaming on the move, a thinner, lower power model might serve you better. Another nuance is upgradability. The RAM is soldered, so you can't add more later. Good news if you bought the 64GB already, but it locks you into that configuration. The SSD.